One of the most fun things to do in Madden's franchise mode is to take a team that's not so good and rebuild them into a Super Bowl contender. In this video, I'm going to go over the 10 best teams to rebuild in Madden 24. The first team I want to talk about is the Green Bay Packers. Now, this is one of the better teams on the list, but the reason they're going to be a fun rebuild is for a few things. Number one, they don't have a star quarterback. Now, Jordan Love is expected to be that guy, and he'll be somebody that's actually very fun to develop. He's going to have some speed. He's going to be able to throw on the run. He's a guy that you could build in the game to be like the second coming of Mahomes if you really wanted to, based on some of the attributes and his style of play. Or if you want to go a whole different route, trade him and try to draft Caleb Williams, you could do that too. Now, when looking at this team, the one thing that they kind of have in place is a solid defense. They have Alexander, they've got Rashawn Gary, they've got Kenny Clark, they've got Devondre Campbell, Rasul Douglas. They've actually got a really solid young secondary. They've got a couple guys on the D-line, but the offense is really what you're getting this team to rebuild. They have no quarterback outside of developing Jordan Love. If you look here, there's not even a receiver that's 78 plus overall. They do have Aaron Jones at 88, but he's kind of at that age where running backs start to regress. And then you do have a younger AJ Dillon, but this is a team where you need to get receivers, you need to develop a QB, you need to get a tight end, and you might need to even be looking into running back as well. When you go on the second page here, you have Christian Watson. That is your best young receiver that you can try to develop. He's only a 77 overall, but he does have 96 speed. But you're just seeing that this is kind of a team that nothing really wows you about them. Once they lost Adams and now Aaron Rodgers, this is a team offensively that you can actually spend a lot of time rebuilding, and hopefully you can just keep the defense intact. The next team is the Atlanta Falcons. Now, I do think this is one of the easier teams to rebuild as well on the list because they actually do have a lot of solid pieces. This is another team that's lacking the QB, and you could go the route of trying to develop Desmond Ridder, which could be fun because he is an 88 speed quarterback, so he could be a lot of fun to use. Or this is a team where you could try to do the tank, get Caleb Williams or one of those other young QBs, maybe trade for a QB as well, and you could have a fun team on your hands. But when you look at this team, they have a good young secondary. They've got Bates, they've got AJ Terrell, they've got a stud young tight end and Kyle Pitts, one of the best weapons in the game. They got a decent young receiver and Drake London, a tall guy. They've got a good running back room with Cordell Patterson, who is old, but Bijan at an 81 overall as a rookie is going to be your star player probably on this offense going forward. They've also got a decent offensive line as well, but if you're rebuilding this team, what you really have to look at is building up the defensive line because it's not very good. You do have Grady Jarrett, but he's not really a dominant Madden defensive lineman, and he's starting to get a little bit older. And you got Calais Campbell, who's definitely old and will not be playing much longer. So you have to kind of build up the D-line. You definitely need to get another receiver to pair with Drake London. You have to either progress your QB or find a new one. Looking on the second page here, you can see you don't really have a lot in terms of linebacker play on this team. You definitely need to build up the linebacker. So there's definitely a decent amount of positions that you want to build up. The strength of the team is going to be some of the weapons they do have on offense and definitely the secondary. But outside of that, there's definitely a lot of holes to fill on this team, and this could be a very fun team to rebuild. Now, hey, if you're still here at this point of the video and you haven't subscribed yet, you might as well just go ahead and subscribe because you're basically already a part of the family whether you like it or not. I'm going to be providing franchise and gameplay tips all year long. I really would love to hit 1 million subscribers one day. I need your help on that journey, and it would be greatly appreciated. The next rebuild team is going to be the Washington Commanders, and they're going to be fun for a few reasons. Now, again, this is another team that has a couple decent pieces in place, but they're severely lacking in the quarterback department. They also are going to need some weapons because outside of Terry McLaurin, this isn't a team that really has a lot of weapons. The running back room in real life isn't too bad, but in terms of Madden, they definitely need to either be developed or you need to go find another guy. You could definitely use another receiver. You do have a young Jahan Dotson that you can try to develop, but Curtis Samuel's starting to get a little older, so he's not a guy that you really want to rely on. The thing that this team does have going forward is they have a couple of key pieces on defense. Jonathan Allen's a guy that you want to keep around to be a cornerstone. He could be a 99. You've got Chase Young, who you could develop into a 99. Deron Payne is good. You've got some good young players in Cameron Curl, Montez Sweat. This is a defensive team that if you add a couple other pieces, I would say you definitely want to look at corner because Kendall Fuller is getting older. So that's a guy I'd probably be looking to get rid of and try to just get some younger corners. But you have some safeties. You have a defensive line. On offense, it's basically just Terry, who's another guy that you could probably get to 99. Outside of that, you need to do some work work there, both on the offensive line and especially with the QB. But another thing that's fun about this team is because in real life, they're under new ownership, and they said that they're going to be rebranding once again soon. And with the new relocation updates in Madden 24, this is a perfect team to do relocation with and kind of rebrand as a completely different team. So I think they would be super fun to rebuild for both of those reasons. The next team we're going to look at is the Tampa Bay Bucks. Now, this is another team that's got a few decent pieces, but there's no QB in sight. You've got Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask. Neither of those guys are likely to be the QB of the future. The strongest thing about this team is going to be the defense, but the offense definitely needs work. Levante David, one of the best players on the team, he's getting very old. He's going to probably retire soon. He's probably going to start regressing soon in the game as well. So if I was going to rebuild this team, I'd be looking to get whatever value I could for Levante David based on his age, because he's still a 91, so you might be able to get something decent back for him. I'd probably also be looking into moving Mike Evans as well. Even though he's still solid, he's starting to get a little older too, and for a guy that's not a fast receiver at his age, he's probably going to start regressing soon as well. So I would look to move those guys and get back some picks and maybe some other players. Obviously, you've got guys like Tristan Wirfs and Vita Vea, Antoine Winfield, who'll be your young cornerstones. You keep them around. This team actually has a really good young secondary. Everybody's young, and they're mostly all 80 plus, but you definitely need to find the QB. You probably need to find your next receiver of the future. You need to find running backs, because the running back room is now really bad for the Bucks after losing Fournette. You definitely have to look at the linebackers, because Levante David's on his way out, and he's kind of the only notable one left, because Devin White is no longer highly rated in the game, and he's a guy that in real life I think wants to get traded potentially. Pass rusher is also kind of an area of need too, because Shaquille Barrett's still solid in the game, especially if he's going to still have abilities, but he's also getting a little older as well. So there's really a lot of holes to plug on this team, in my opinion, and if you get rid of a guy like Levante David, they instantly become even worse. So I definitely think this is one of the best candidates. Our next team is another NFC North team, and that is the Bears. They have nobody in the 90 overall, so this is one of the better rebuild candidates, and they only have a few players that are even 80 plus. Now, they did bring over DJ Moore, who's solid. They have Justin Fields, who you'll absolutely want to develop. I don't think there'll be a more fun QB you can find than Justin Fields, but he is pretty lowly rated, so you actually have some work cut out for you to develop him, which would be fun. You've got a new number one receiver in DJ Moore, but outside of that, and maybe Tremaine Edwards and TJ Edwards, who are solid and still pretty young, you definitely need a lot of work on this team. Eddie Jackson's probably a guy in real life that could be on his way out soon. He's not super old, but he's not a guy that has been having his best years the past few seasons, so I'd probably look to get rid of him potentially. You definitely need to look at the receiving core, because outside of DJ Moore, you don't have anybody that's that great. You have Cole Kmet at a 79, who's okay. You have Darnell Mooney at an 81, who isn't that bad. He's got some speed, but you need to build up Fields. You need running backs. You need to build up the offensive line. When you look at the secondary, like I said, it's okay, but I think they could use some work as well. The defensive line can use some work. There's really no good pass rusher here. I mean, the strength of this team is truly the linebackers. So there's a lot that needs to be done with this team, and I think because you have such a fun young player like Justin Fields, it makes it even that much more fun to rebuild this team. Next, we're going to talk about the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, at first glance, this doesn't look like that bad of a team, but you have to factor in the QB situation is very bad. Jimmy Garoppolo probably not going to turn this team around, but you have to also consider, look at the two best players. Devontae Adams, who's rumored to kind of want out in real life, and that may happen at some point soon, if not this year, maybe next, because he went to the Raiders to be on a team that he thought would be a contender and also to play with Derek Carr. Derek Carr is gone. Darren Waller is gone. This team is going to be significantly worse more than likely this year. And then you've also got Josh Jacobs, who still has not gotten a new contract yet. They want to franchise tag him. They may wind up giving him a new deal, but with the way running backs are handled, that's another guy that there may be the potential that he isn't on this team in a couple years from now. We don't know that yet. So if you take those two guys kind of out of the mix, who in real life may not be on this team that much longer, I mean, they don't really have too much. If I was rebuilding this team, I would definitely get rid of Adams, just because I think in real life that makes sense. At his age, I don't think he wants to be on a team that's not a contender. So you could trade him at 97 and probably get a decent haul back for him. And once you remove him from the team, even if you do decide to keep Josh Jacobs, there's a lot of rebuilding that needs to take place. You need to find a quarterback. You need more receivers, because Hunter Renfrow and Jacoby Myers, even as your next guys, are not that great, especially when you factor in their speed. You need a tight end. They lost both of their tight ends. I mean, two of the best players on this team are the kicker and punter. One of the best players on this team is Marcus Peters, who is very old. He's not going to be playing much longer, and he's going to regress. Chandler Jones, another one of their best players. He's getting old, probably not going to play too much longer, and he's going to continue to regress. regress. A lot of the best players on this team are older guys or they're special teams guys. So you need to find the secondary. You need to find the offensive line. You need to find receivers. You need a tight end. You need a quarterback. You need actual linebackers, because the two linebackers that are good on this team are actually pass rushers. This team actually has a lot of potential in a rebuild, and it could be very fun and challenging. Next up is the Los Angeles Rams, and they're very top heavy. You look at their top two guys, 96 plus, but after that, look at the drop off. The next guy is an 82 overall, and Aaron Donald in real life, he might not even play much longer. I think he could still play quite a bit longer because he's that good, but he's kind of talked about retirement, and with the Rams kind of being where they are, there's a very good chance he either retires soon or he wants to be traded, just straight up, because if he's going to play out the last few years of his career, the Rams are not going to be very good, and he's probably going to want to go somewhere else. So as much as that would hurt if you wanted to rebuild this team, I think trading Aaron Donald makes sense when you factor in his age and the window of the Rams team, both in real life and even in a rebuild in Madden. You could probably still get a good amount for him because he's a 99 overall, and in real life, that is something that might potentially happen in the near future. Cooper Kupp is a little bit older as well, but he's still solid. I would definitely keep him. But outside of that, I mean, this team needs a QB. They need other receivers. You got Cam Akers, which I think is a decent running back to stick with. You've got Higbee, who he's an okay tight end, but when you factor in that he's 79 speed in Madden, you want somebody better than that. You need everybody on defense. I mean, the best defensive player is literally a 75 overall cornerback. You need literally every position on defense outside of Aaron Donald, who, if you're truly rebuilding the Rams, you'd probably be looking to get rid of. Matthew Stafford's a 75 and he's old. He's near retirement. This could very easily be his last year playing, and he's going to continue to regress. Stetson Bennett, probably not a guy that's going to really be the QB of the future, and he's already old for a rookie as well. So this is a team that you need the most important position. You need almost everything on defense, and you need almost everything on offense. It's one of the best rebuild candidates of Madden 24. The next team is the Houston Texans, another team that I think would be really fun to rebuild, and I don't think they're as bad as even some of the other teams on this list, but their best player is a left tackle, and that's the only guy in the 90s, and they only have a few other guys in the 80s. This is a team that definitely still needs a lot. Now, obviously, with your quarterback, you're probably going to try to develop CJ Stroud. Outside of that, you do have a good safety in Jimmy Ward, but he's a little bit older, I believe. You have Dameon Pierce, a nice young running back to stick with. Dalton Schultz is a solid tight end, but outside of that, you need receivers on this team, absolutely. You need a lot of players on defense for sure. You need a secondary, but interestingly enough, there are some solid pieces here. You have Desmond King, who's older, so I wouldn't really factor him in, but you have Shaquille Griffin, a fast corner, who's nice. You've got Denzel Perryman, decent linebacker. Jimmy Ward is good as well, but like I said, he's a little older. Then we look here, we've got Will Anderson, who's young. He's going to be fun to develop. Derek Stingley, young. Petrie, young. All these guys are young and fun to develop. So the defense, you actually have players here that you can just develop. You don't have to even go out and get too crazy on defense. You do need to fill holes in other places, but this is a team I think that is more fun in terms of the guys that are already here to develop. Will Anderson, Stingley, Petrie, you've got CJ Stroud, you've got Dameon Pierce, you've got John Mechie, who missed his whole rookie season. There's a lot of young guys here that are ready to be developed, and then you can fill other holes elsewhere. Another AFC South team that will be fun to rebuild is the Colts. Again, their best player, much like the Texans, is an offensive lineman, and after that, there's nobody else in the 90s. Now, they do have a handful of 80 overall players, which is nice, but Jonathan Taylor, when you look at the fact that he might very likely be traded in real life at some point soon. So if you want to go realistic with the rebuild, you could trade Jonathan Taylor. Obviously, it would make more sense to keep him because he's a young stud running back and he'll actually be good in Madden for quite some time. But if you want to take the realistic approach of actually trading Jonathan Taylor, which could very well happen, this team, I think, instantly becomes a much more fun rebuild candidate because when you take him off the team, it gets a lot more challenging. But this team actually does have some decent young pieces. Michael Pittman is a guy that's a young, good receiver that can be developed. You've obviously got the Anthony Richardson, super fast, strong arm. He's going to be a fun QB to develop, one of the most fun QBs in Madden by far. You've got some decent young players on defense as well, but you still need to build out a full receiving core. If you trade Jonathan Taylor, you got to build the running back room. You've got to build up some of the offensive line as well. You've got to develop Anthony Richardson, which at a 70 overall is going to take some time. You've got to build up the secondary. You've got to build up some of the pass rushers on this team. So this could be a very fun team, in my opinion, to rebuild, but one of the biggest reasons for sure is going to be Anthony Richardson. And finally, we have the Arizona Cardinals. I think probably going to be the most rebuilt team this year. I don't even necessarily think that they're the worst on this list. I think the Rams might actually be a little bit worse, but when you look at the Cardinals, they need a lot. And they lost DeAndre Hopkins. Budda Baker in real life, I believe, wants a trade. So if I was being realistic with this, I'd probably just go ahead and trade Budda Baker. Even though he is a young, good safety, there's a good chance he could potentially get traded in real life soon. And once you take him off of this, I mean, you have Marquise Brown, who is fast, so he'd be fun to use, but that's definitely not a guy that you want to be your number one receiver. Zach Ertz is your third best player, and he is old, so he's going to continue to regress, and he probably won't be on the team much longer. You have Isaiah Simmons, who will be a very fun player to develop because he hasn't quite developed like expected in real life yet, and he's a super stud in the game, so he's a guy you can develop. Yeah, another fast receiver with Rondale Moore, but he's super short. So, like, there's not a lot that stands out about this team. You have Kyler Murray, who, if I was rebuilding this team, I would try to develop Kyler Murray. We've seen him get into, like, the mid to high 80s before, but now he's regressed. So, he's actually a fun development candidate. You need to build the running back room. James Conner's your best running back. You're going to need to build the receiver room. You need almost everything on defense. You need to build the O-line. This team needs so much. I think probably the most fun team to rebuild in Madden 24. Now, when you're rebuilding a team, you're going to need some really good trade targets. So if you want to know the top 15 best players to trade for in Madden 24, make sure you check out this important video right here on the screen.